Hello, and welcome back to Translator's Troubles for students of Greek and Latin. Today, I want to talk briefly about Martial's relationship with Caesar, as exemplified in two epigrams, Martial 1.4 and 1.5. I'm sure that much ink has been spilled, and that more will be, on the subject of the relationship between satire and power in Rome. We know, for instance, that when Martial criticizes identifiable people, he tends to be playful. He is only really vicious against fictitious targets or people that are already dead. The playfulness that we see in 1.4 and 1.5 is a good example of how he chose to relate to living power in the person of Caesar. As we can see from the last two lines of 1.4, Martial is here and elsewhere concerned specifically with Caesar's role as censor. What exactly was this role, and why was it important to Martial? At its inception, way back in the early days of the Republic, the power of the censorship was limited to the taking of the census. By the time of the Empire, various duties had been added, all related, generally, to keeping tabs on what everyone else was doing. The responsibilities had even grown to include the rather ominous-sounding duty of the regimen morum, or the keeping of the public morals. This added duty, of course, gives us the modern meaning of the word. One can't help but be reminded of the Saudi police of vice and virtue. Given this, it might be expected that a poet like Martial, who traded in obscene material, would have had a touch-and-go relationship with the authorities. But this was Rome. During the Floralia, prostitutes would dance and fight naked in the streets. People would be torn to bits by animals, to the cheering of crowds in the Colosseum. Fucking your slave boys and girls up the ass was considered perfectly fine, as long as it wasn't done to excess. Even then, excessive sexuality would have marked a man merely as effeminate, a bit like being a metrosexual today. It certainly wouldn't have marked him as a criminal in need of state correction. Clearly, what exactly was considered acceptable public morality differed quite a bit from what one would naively expect from what was essentially a military dictatorship that contained an office of the censor. In a world where having too much anal sex with your slaves gets you a disapproving look, how much could an obscene poet get away with? The answer seems to be quite a lot. We know, however, that Ovid was exiled by the Emperor Augustus. The reasons for Ovid's exile are a little murky, but he claims that it was because of the Ars Amatoria, a long poem all about the best ways to go about having illicit sex and commit adultery. Juvenal, one of Martial's contemporaries, was also exiled, apparently because he insulted the wrong, well-connected person in his satires. So clearly exile was a real possibility for a popular poet. Martial 1.4 and 1.5 are interesting because they give us some insight into how Martial diffuses this tension, something that Juvenal and Ovid failed to do. Let's look first at 1.4. This translates to something like, "If you by chance read our book, Caesar, put aside your lordly frown. Our triumphs are accustomed to carry jokes, nor does it shame a leader to be the subject of talk. Look at me like a dancer or a clown. The censor can permit innocent fun. My pages are guilty, but my life innocent." This is all, to be sure, a touch abject, but his message is clear. Don't take me seriously, this is all in good fun. The masterstroke of disarmament, though, comes in the next epigram, 1.5, a short two-liner. Martial speaks in the person of Caesar, which is audacious enough, and he says the following: "I give you sea battles in the arena, and you give me epigrams. I think that you want to be set afloat with your book." What we have here is a barely veiled threat of exile, spoken by Caesar to Martial. But in the context of the previous poem, it's clearly a self-deprecating attack by Martial against himself. What ruler would like to be thought so humorless as to react negatively to this? In addition to Marshall's famous line, "Skewer the vices but spare the people," I think this two-epigram combination gives us a glimpse into how Marshall could be so safe and yet so biting. He makes the authorities part of the joke, and always and everywhere claims to be kidding, even when he isn't. Marshall speaks truth, and sometimes even truth to power, with finesse. I think that this is one of his most important virtues. This has been Translator's Troubles. Thanks for watching. If you'd like, please subscribe for more content, hit the like button below, and check out my Patreon at patreon.com/Homeric Dialect.